I never thought I would love the taste of toothpaste this much, but now it's just like, I'm just like, wait till I get home and brush my teeth. That's the fifth taste of the day. I'm in it. And water sucks, apparently. I hate water now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to say to you these things to make me seem like deeply superficial and undermining what you're doing, but I went on a juice cleanse once. And I found myself like I would have killed somebody for a can of tuna for some reason. All I wanted was a can of tuna.
I'll tell you, I have weird fixations. I think about biscuits, ice cream, biryani, anything, frankly. Candles all of a sudden smell so much better because it feels like taste.
Oh,
anyway,
Lord. Have you done this before?
No, I mean, I Muslim, I fast for Ramadan, but that's like, 12 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
this is a different ball game, but yeah, the best part is that everyone in my family is now definitely a doctor, and they're calling me. They're like, I think you're going to lose your vision if you do it another day. You got to call it off. And I'm like,
So I'm here with Zohran Mamdani, the assembly member from Astoria, Queens, New York, who has been on a hunger strike for now 7 days. We're talking at the end of day 7. Tell us what's going on and why.
So thank you so much for having me on, first of all. It's truly a pleasure, always is. What is going on right now is New York City taxi drivers are fighting for their right to life, frankly. We are in the midst of a crisis that the city created and has maintained over the last decade and some change. Right now, the taxi drivers that I'm standing in solidarity with, that I'm hunger striking in solidarity with, are fighting for New York City to change their debt relief proposal to include a city-backed guarantee, which would mean that the city would guarantee all of the loans that these drivers have. And the reason that's so critical is that is the mechanism by which these drivers will actually be able to afford their payments. And when I say it's about a right to life, it is not hyperbole, because in the last few years, 9 drivers have taken their own lives by suicide. And that figure doesn't capture the amount of despair that we have seen for drivers who have died prematurely because of strokes, because of heart attacks, all consequences of the stress of being hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in a market that has been flooded by Lyft and Uber and trapped in predatory lending agreements that the city helped to facilitate.
So for those who don't know how the medallion system works, can you give us a little background? How much do they cost, and why has the value declined, and by how much? Absolutely.
So the medallion was a 20th century creation, if I'm remembering correctly. This is the 1930s, let's say, around there, if not maybe a little earlier. And it was a means by which the city could control who had the license to pick up passengers in the 5 boroughs. And so the medallion is literally like a small symbol that is placed on the hood of the car. That gives the car the right to operate as a taxi within New York City. And so for decades, up until I would say just at the turn of the millennium in the early 2000s, the medallion's value got up to and would be around, let's say, between $130,000 to $200,000. That's typically where it was. Then Bloomberg comes into office in 2001, the left's best friend, as we all know, and the city is in a $3.8 billion deficit. And so, $3.1 billion. 7th day of hunger strike.
Yeah, no worries. You get some mulligans.
$3.1 billion deficit. And Bloomberg's administration pinpoints medallions as a means by which to make up some of that revenue. So the city then makes, over the next 13, 14, 15 years, $855 million off of selling new medallions. And the issue here is not just that the city regulated this market, but that in selling these new medallions, the city was artificially inflating the price of these medallions. And I say that because you could only buy medallions from the city by participating in an auction where the city would set the opening bid of the medallion. And at the highest point, the city set an opening bid of $850,000 in 2014.
So to purchase a medallion, which gives you the right to pick up passengers and operate as a taxi in New York City, you had to pay $850,000 at its peak.
At its peak, it actually even went up to $1 million. That was the opening bid. That was the floor that you had to bid.
Who could afford this? What kind of payment structure were these drivers operating under?
This is the other thing, is that after 2008, you had a number of lenders that were barred from operating in the housing market, and the city welcomed those lenders to operate in the medallion market. And so you had all of these immigrants, and all of this is, when I say all of these immigrants, 94% of drivers in New York City, taxi drivers, are immigrants. 94%. So you have all of these immigrants who are actively being called by lenders and brokers on behalf of banks and predatory equity firms saying, we can help you finance this medallion. You don't even have to put all of this money down all at once. We can help you with all of these aspects of the deal. We can broker it for you. And so many of them got trapped into agreements where there were these massive balloon payments at the end, or they were just paying interest for years. So many of the kind of classroom examples of what predatory lending looks like, they have occurred in the context of this taxi medallion crisis. So you have the city artificially inflating the medallion, doing it knowingly because there was a city memo that said the price of the medallion is outstripping the worth of the medallion, because the worth of the medallion was 130 to 200. Nothing about the market really changed to make the medallion quadruple or quintuple in value. It was just the city seeking a means by which to make that money, to plug that hole, and feeling like these are immigrants, they might go home anyway, and what is their organized political base that they can hold us accountable with? They don't have one. And then on top of this, there are two small things. Well, not small at all. One is that the city puts a 5% transfer tax on every medallion sale. So if you're buying a medallion for $1 million, all of a sudden you're paying an additional $50,000 to the city just for processing. And two, and this is an extremely big factor in the crisis, is that the city, after having kept such a tight lid on how many cars could operate as taxis that could pick up passengers, from the street, then allows Lyft and Uber to flood the market. We're talking about going from, less than 30,000 taxis to 100,000 additional. And a study showed that inflation accounted for, there was a drop of 44% of revenue due to the influx of Lyft and Uber for taxi drivers.
So now these medallions, which were, I was reading an article that said the average, cost is about $550,000. The value is now dropped to only being about $100,000. But that doesn't mean that people no longer have to pay on that $550,000, largely because of actions taken on behalf of the city. Now, de Blasio came out with a solution for this in March that is considered widely inadequate for the moment. Can you walk us through what's being proposed and why it's not enough?
Absolutely. And this is really one of the struggles of this fight, is that so much of it is living in the weeds. Because when you hear on the surface, city proposes $65 million debt relief plan, it sounds good. But the issue is that the plan, which is supposed to take on the market, is actually even worse than what the market is offering. And what I mean by that is that lenders were approaching drivers saying, look, we'll restructure your loan, we'll make your monthly payment $1,600 a month. Then the city comes out with the $65 million plan, which at its essence is eligible drivers will receive up to $20,000 as a down payment towards their loan. And the city will use that $20,000 to bring lenders to the table to restructure these loans. But in the conditions of the plan, the city will allow a lender to pocket that $20K and then set monthly payments up to and including $2,000. So the market was offering $1,600. The city is saying take $20K and you can actually even bump your monthly payment that you're asking the driver for by $400.
Why would they even structure it that way? Like, what's the point of that?
I don't know. I really don't have an answer for why the city put that forward. It's, this was on the back of the city council doing an internal investigation that found the city responsible for the crisis.
Well, has there been any response to your hunger strike, the strikes of others that are sitting outside of, the mayor's offices, city council offices, I presume, have put to them that this plan they proposed is inadequate. Has there been any feedback at all in response?
Well, a lot of the feedback has not been direct with us as the strikers or with the union. It's been, thankfully, because of the work and the fact that so many drivers have put their bodies on the line and have made it clear what the stakes are, the media is covering this in a way that it hadn't previously when this debt relief plan was proposed. And so the mayor is having to answer to this demand at press conferences, in interviews. But the answer is always a mixture of the market created this. This is a step forward. We have to do what we can. We don't have enough money.
Okay, but the market quite obviously didn't create this.
Yeah. One, the market didn't create this. Two, this is actually a step backward. If you were going to be offered $1,600 and now you're offered $2,000. Three, the city clearly has the money for this. We have an annual budget of $100 billion. We're talking about $93 million over 30 years. That's the cost of adding a guarantee. $93 million comes down to about $3 million a year. So there is, I truly believe what this issue has been with so much of politics has just been, can we show that we're not going anywhere? Can we break through the noise of political discourse? And can we make it clear that the guarantee is non-negotiable? And there has been, the work that we have done on the outside, rallies, protests, sign-on letters, hunger strike, arrests. There's clearly movement internally, but it's not where it needs to be. And that's why we're still doing this, because this isn't just a show. This isn't just to score political points. We truly believe we can win this, and we truly believe that we can get the city there. And that's the other beautiful thing about these drivers, is that there's a complete willingness to stand alongside the mayor and declare his decision a victory if he adds the guarantee. It's just that they cannot afford to go home to $2,000 monthly payments and a debt relief plan that, if they default, allows the lenders to go after their home, their car, all their assets. They can't go home to that.
Yeah, I got to say, I really am not trying to make everything about me and my student loan debt, but this has big student loan debt energy. The idea that you took out all of these kind of guaranteed loans with this guarantee that you were going to be able to recoup it down the line. Suddenly the value of your degree plummets, and the people who dealt the debt said, oh, this is the bargain that you made. You just kind of have to deal. And there are people who have, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 plus dollars worth of debt for degrees that are meaningless. And it is causing these kind of similar amounts of despair. I know you mentioned that nine taxi drivers have committed suicide over the last few years, and that each day of this hunger strike is committed to one of their memories, each individual's memory. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the people who've passed away, perhaps the person who today is dedicated to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, today we dedicated it to Abdul, who was a Yemeni driver who died on Eid, which is, one of the holiest days in the Islamic calendar. And it's something else to think about, a day that we would usually celebrate with food. And here we are on hunger strike, honoring the memory of a man who died on that day. And his story is like so many other stories that we've been honoring over the course of these days. It's a story of a man left with nothing but debt. It's a story of a man who could not afford to pay for his family. He actually had to send his family back to Yemen and saw, in essence, a choice between a life where he would just continually be devastated by debt or death, which in some ways offered more relief than life. And it's, we often talk about the nine drivers. And then when you get to telling their stories, meeting their families, you understand the gravity of what has been said. We have one of the drivers on hunger strike, Richard Chow. His brother took his own life, Kenny Chow. We had dedicated, I think it was yesterday, to Kenny. And you see the memory and the way he seeks to honor that memory through struggle. And he, I would say, is the moral leader of the movement, of the union. a man in his 60s with diabetes and high blood pressure on the 7th day of hunger strike, and I can see how it's debilitating him. Like I have headaches, I've had moments of blurred vision, I have thorough exhaustion and unrelenting hunger, but compared to him, I can just see his body in some ways shutting down. And I've been asking him to stop, and so many others have as well, and he refuses to, because he says if he stops, then we've lost, and that he needs to continue until not just the negotiations begin, but we get the guarantee. And that is what pushes me to be on a hunger strike. It's what pushes me to get arrested. It's what pushes me to use, what some of my colleagues might say in the pejorative are activist tactics. It's that compromise in this case would mean death for so many of these drivers. And I know that because the histories of this crisis, the people we have lost, and the drivers who have come up to me to say that I've been speaking to my fellow drivers and they told me that they were thinking about taking their own lives, and then they saw this protest as a source of hope. I mean, it's unbelievable what's been going on here. And then when you see who it is, it's these uncles and aunties, 50, 60, 70 years old. You ask them where they're from. It's Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Haiti, Ivory Coast, Romania, like the places we hold up in this city as our branding, right? Diversity, a city that is a safe haven for immigrants, sanctuary city. But this crisis has just been felt by immigrants.
Can you tell me a little bit about the choice to use this particular tactic? I mean, was it whose decision was it to go on a hunger strike? And, why do you think that this, as opposed to certain other kinds of tactics, just, striking, having a picket line, other kinds of media events, won't be as effective or wouldn't be as effective?
I think that, it is a tactic that I've seen used over so much time by so many that so many of us admire as an organizing tactic, as a political tactic. But most recently, my colleague and a dear friend who I really admire, Marcella Matenis, assemblywoman from Sunset Park, went on hunger strike for 13 days in solidarity with the Excluded Workers Fund fight, which, for those who don't know, was a fight to create unemployment for undocumented New Yorkers who lost their job over the course of the pandemic. And they won a $2.1 billion fund. She went on hunger strike for 13 days. There were excluded workers who were on hunger strike for the totality of it for 23 days, I think it was. North of 20 for sure. And so that was an inspiration in terms of the immediate sense. Thinking of its applicability here, it's that we had tried all of the channels. I'm a member of the city's committee in Albany. What that means is that when every year the mayor comes to testify in front of the state legislature, and as a member of the committee, I get to ask questions of the mayor. So this is March, April of this year, right after the proposal has been put forward by the city. And I asked him about how it was insufficient and what he would do to actually meet the demands of drivers. This is back in the spring. Didn't get a real answer. Since then, the union has been pushing for this. I helped to coordinate a sign-on letter with 74 city and state officials. No answer. The entire New York City congressional delegation comes out in support of the guarantee. We're talking AOC to Tom Suozzi. No answer. Chuck Schumer comes out in support of this guarantee. No answer. We've done rallies. 32 days, there was a 24/7 protest outside City Hall. 32 days, 24/7. I was there 7-8 times, brought in so many other elected officials who came to stand in support and solidarity. No answer. After all of those things, you're left with what can we do to shock the political consciousness of those who are in power and those who are within reach, of them.
Yeah. I definitely, I saw the first, fortunately, unfortunately, the first this really came on my radar was when I saw AOC with the union, sitting with the union last week in solidarity. And then I happened across a tweet about you being on hunger strike. And, that really stopped me in my tracks. Friend of the pod, what's going on? And I'm curious whether, having AOC come out and support has made a difference. Chuck Schumer, I mean, these are high profile folks, and still no movement from the mayor's office?
It's been extremely helpful to have someone like AOC, someone like Chuck Schumer. It's really important. I'm a proud socialist legislator, member of DSA, and it is important in these kinds of fights to ensure that they cannot say, "Oh, that's just a niche issue. That's just Zohran. He's going to be on hunger strike for something." And you see this. I mean, there's a massive ideological spectrum of the New York City congressional delegation and of the 74 people who signed on at the city and state level. It just showcases that this is a popular call, and it's one that people sympathize with because, in essence, and I take issue with this framing a lot of the time, but if you think about the way people put forward political arguments, they say, with regards to American dream and immigrants, it's like, come to this country, work hard, and you'll get what you deserve. Everyone sees what taxi drivers do. Yeah. It's in popular consciousness that taxi drivers work very hard, 6-day, 7-day weeks. That isn't a place of contention. And so there's this general, mass sentiment towards taxi drivers that they deserve something. And now the issue for us in the narrative has been, it's not just Lyft and Uber that are the villains, because many people think it's just them. It's just rideshare companies. They're definitely a part of it, but it's that the city has culpability. And we're seeing movement internally in the city. It's definitely had an impact, but we won't leave, not even if the mayor says, I hear what they're saying and I'm interested in it. We're going to keep striking until we get the guarantee. And I've had people say, this is a bit of an extreme tactic. And to them, I say that this tactic and the consequences of it, headaches, blurred vision, stress, hunger, inability to sleep, these are actually the exact symptoms that drivers tell me they suffer from because of the debt crisis. I've had drivers say they cannot go to bed thinking of being $600,000 in debt. They cannot pay for their family's groceries because they can't make their monthly payment. They have high blood pressure, they have diabetes, they have cholesterol issues because of the stress. And they're seeing that stress manifest itself in the fact that they sometimes are not able to see fully. So it's everything that the city is already doing. The only issue for people is that we're doing it in front of City Hall, or that I, an elected official, am doing it alongside these ordinary people. And that's the whole purpose, I think, of holding elected office, is to amplify the struggles of those who are not in office, to bring that struggle front and center. And it's truly, when you're in this struggle with other drivers, there is no question, there is no dithering about what it is we're doing and the purpose of doing it.
Well, Zohran, can you help our listeners understand what they can do to lend their support or help to amplify this cause?
Absolutely. To the listeners, thank you again for tuning in, as always. The things that you can do to help: one, it's a matter of public consciousness. The reason I'm on this pod is because there were a couple tweets about this issue. You do not know what your tweets could do. Yeah. You do not know who they could reach. It truly helps us break through into public and political consciousness. So please tweet about this. Please express your support for this. Two, the union has material needs. The union has asked for chairs and blankets. So if you live in New York City or around, please come to Broadway and Murray and bring those things. Three, there's a strike fund. You never know when the cops are going to give taxi drivers tickets for participating in this protest. I've seen it myself. And you never know which drivers need help to, getting their electrolytes, having a room that they can stay in because they actually live in Staten Island, but here they are in downtown Manhattan. And four is, if you live in New York City, please call your city council representative and let them know that this issue is your priority and you want to know what they're doing to force the mayor to add a city-backed guarantee to this city's budget. And let them know it's only $93 million. That's $3 million a year, and we have a $100 billion annual budget in this city.
Is there some concern that part of the issue here is that de Blasio is on his way out and doesn't feel like he needs to be as responsive as he might otherwise have to be?
There is some concern about what does it mean to be doing this in the final months of the administration. I still think that there's absolutely a way forward in doing this. And I think that, part of that is because this really, I have made big asks. I was there, a central organizer around the ask for our state legislator to increase taxes by $50 billion. I'm not afraid to make those asks, but this is $93 million. This is the city, I think, spent $200 million to buy a storage facility at a park in Brooklyn recently. We're talking about peanuts in terms of expenditures. So it's truly about, can we get the mayor there? And then once he's there, can we celebrate a true ending of this crisis for these drivers?
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us when I know your energy levels cannot be great. I am famously very unpleasant if I go 2 hours without eating. So I really do appreciate your commitment to this, as you are committed to so many things. And I hope when you're next on the podcast, it's when you are better fed and in better spirits, and hopefully talking about something happy and useful that's happened in progressive world.
I really cannot wait for that day. I can't tell you how much I dream about it.
Well, thank you again. And we will put the links to the strike fund and any other links that you forward along in the show notes to this episode. And best of luck to you.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.
Anytime. Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.